Hey, Class 10 students, welcome! If you're tackling the rise of nationalism in Europe, you are in exactly the right spot. This explainer from A1 Institute is built from the ground up to get you totally exam ready for this super important chapter.
Alright, so let's set the scene. After Napoleon was defeated, the old guard of Europe got together and tried to stuff the genie back in the bottle. They put kings back on their thrones and did everything they could to restore the old ways. But, it was just too late. These new ideas about liberty and nationalism, they were already spreading like wildfire. Europe wasn't just changing, it was a powder keg waiting for a spark.
So here's our game plan, our mission briefing for your exam. We're going to hit 5 key topics: the secret underground uprisings, the story of a revolutionary named Mazzini, the wild domino effect of 1830, the cultural revolution of Romanticism, and finally, what happens when the people themselves take to the streets. Let's get into it.
First up, the underground uprising. See, after 1815, the conservative monarchies were cracking down hard. If you openly talked about liberal ideas, you could end up in jail, or worse. So what do? You go underground. Revolutionaries started forming secret societies all across Europe to train, plan, and spread their ideas away from prying eyes. So what did it really mean to be a revolutionary back then? It wasn't just a cool title, it was a serious commitment. It meant you were dedicated to 2 things. First, getting rid of the old kings and emperors, and second, fighting for these radical new ideas called liberty and freedom.
And this slide lays out the big showdown perfectly. On one side, you've got the conservative order. They want to keep things as they are. Kings in charge, big empires, no changes. But on the other side, you've got the liberal nationalists. Liberal because they wanted things like freedom of the press. And nationalist because they believed people with a shared culture should have their own country, their own nation-state. This was the clash that defined the era.
Speaking of revolutionaries, we have to talk about this guy, Giuseppe Mazzini. He was an Italian revolutionary who became like the heart and soul of the entire movement, not just in Italy, but all over Europe.
So how does he get so famous? Well, look at his track record. He joins a secret society called the Carbonari when he's just 24. A couple of years later, he tries to start a revolution and gets himself kicked out of the country, sent into exile. But does that stop him? No way. Exile just makes him more powerful. He starts up his own secret societies, Young Italy and Young Europe, inspiring a whole new generation to fight.
And if you want to know just how big of a deal he was, listen to this. The Austrian Chancellor, Metternich, basically the main guy trying to keep the old system in place, called Mazzini the most dangerous enemy of our social order. I mean, coming from your arch nemesis, that's a pretty big compliment, right?
All right, let's move to our next section. Because now we see what happens when all that underground pressure finally blows. The year is 1830, and it's not just one revolution, it's a chain reaction, a domino effect that just topples one government after another.
And what's crazy is how fast it all happens. It kicks off in France in July 1830. Boom, the Bourbon kings are overthrown. The very next month, that spark lights a fire in Brussels, and Belgium breaks away to become its own country. All of this revolutionary energy also helped the Greeks in their own fight for independence, which they finally won in 1832.
Which brings us back to our friend Metternich. He had this famous saying, "When France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches cold." You'll want to remember that quote for your exam. It perfectly captures how influential France was. Whatever happened in Paris, it spread everywhere else.
But here's something really interesting. This revolution wasn't just fought on the streets. There was another battle going on, a battle for hearts and minds. And that's where this cultural movement, Romanticism, came in. It was a whole different kind of weapon.
So what on earth was Romanticism? Well, it was a huge cultural shift. It pushed back against the idea that everything could be explained by science and reason. Romantics were all about emotion, intuition, and mystical feelings. They believed a nation wasn't a logical contract. It was a living thing with a soul.
So how did they try to find that national soul? They looked to the common people. Das Volk, as the German philosopher Herder called them. They started collecting folk songs, old poems, and local dances. And maybe most importantly, they focused on language. Think about it. In a place like Poland, which was being ruled by Russia, just speaking Polish in church was a powerful act of defiance. It was a way of saying, we are still us.
Okay, so we've got secret societies and romantic poets, but there's one more massive piece to this revolutionary puzzle, and that's the grim reality of daily life for millions of people: hunger, hardship, and the desperation that drove them into the streets.
I mean, just look at the pressure cooker people were living in. The population was exploding, but there weren't enough jobs. Local artisans couldn't compete with cheap, machine-made goods. Peasants were still stuck paying old feudal dues. And to top it all off, bad harvests meant the price of bread went through the roof. It was the absolute perfect storm for a revolt. To see what this looked like on the ground, let's zoom in on a revolt by weavers in a place called Silesia in 1845. And to give you a sense of scale, we're not talking about some tiny hamlet here. This was a village of 18,000 people, a huge number for the time. And they were at their breaking point.
So here's what went down. Contractors started paying the weavers less and less for their work. Finally, they'd had enough. A huge crowd marched to the contractor's mansion to demand the wages they were owed. He threatened them, so they broke into his house, smashing things up and taking supplies. The contractor ran away, but he came back with the army. The result was tragic. 11 weavers were shot and killed. It's just a brutal, clear example of how desperation fueled these revolts.
All of this pressure, all of this anger, it all built up and exploded again in the great revolutionary year of 1848. But the key thing to remember from all this is that these events, they weren't the end of the story. They were just the beginning of a huge wave that would completely change the face of Europe.
We've covered a ton of ground today, but believe me, this is just one part of a much bigger story. To get the full picture for this chapter and make sure you are 100% ready for your exams, you've got to check out our other explainers right here on the A1 Institute channel.
If this helped you connect the dots, do us a huge favor. Hit that like button, share this with your classmates, and if you have any questions at all, drop them in the comments below. We read every single one.
And of course, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next part. Remember, if you're looking for even more support, A1 Institute has exclusive notes and detailed one-on-one guidance to help you really ace those exams.
For admissions or just to learn more about how we can help, feel free to contact us directly. Our phone number is right there in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck with your studies.